Hey everyone, so today we're going to talk through the D5600, and first of all we're just going to talk through the photo shooting menu, special menu button, and head to the shooting menu. The first option we're going to look at is our image quality. So go into image quality, and this is where you can decide if you want your camera to shoot in RAW or in JPEG or just JPEG. Best quality JPEG you could choose would be JPEG Fine, and then if you wanted to just shoot in RAW, you can select just RAW. Next setting down is image size. This is where you can choose how many megapixels your camera will use. So the top one obviously being 24 million pixels. This is generally the setting that I'd recommend to make sure that you get the most of your camera's resolution. We also have two other options, including a medium at 13.5 million pixels and a small at 6 million pixels. Now these can be useful if you are going to be sending these pictures to a family member or friend, just to drop the size of the file down. The next setting down that we want to look at is the RAW recording. In here you'll find two options, a 12-bit option and a 14-bit option. 14-bit is a setting you guys definitely want to choose. After that, we're going to look in ISO sensitivity settings. This is where we can control our ISO, but we can also use an option called Auto ISO. You'll be able to see here that you can turn Auto ISO sensitivity control on or off. There's many different ways of shooting whilst using your camera, and one of the easiest things that you can do is use Auto ISO to help you, especially in challenging lighting conditions. If Auto ISO control is turned on, you only then need to worry about the other two settings, such as shutter speed and aperture, and the camera will then sort out the ISO for you. Once you've turned Auto ISO sensitivity control on, the option for a maximum sensitivity will become available. This is where you can set a maximum sensitivity for your camera. For example, not allowing it to go any higher than 25,600. This maximum sensitivity is based on your personal choice, depending on how much noise and grain you want to get in your images. When Auto ISO sensitivity is turned on, the ISO sensitivity setting at the top of the screen needs to be set to 100. This acts as a bracket, and it's where your camera is going to start from, and it will then roll all the way up to your maximum sensitivity. Next, set picture control. In here you'll see a range of different options: standard, neutral, vivid, monochrome, portrait, landscape, and flat. Depending on the type of photography that you're doing, these can be really useful. The particular favourite of mine is monochrome. What you can do is go and adjust each one of these settings so that they work to your liking. In monochrome, for example, my settings are 5 on sharpening, +2 on clarity, and +2 on contrast. These give me a really nice contrasty black and white in camera for very little work. The next setting we're going to look at is release mode. This is an option where you can choose how quickly your camera will fire. There is a dedicated button for this option as well. It's on the left hand side of your camera. In this setting you'll be able to choose S for single frame, the camera fires once every time you press the shutter button. Continuous low, the camera will fire at 3 frames a second. Continuous high, this is where the camera will fire its maximum frames per second. In the D5600's case, 5 frames a second. And then you have a quieter shutter release. The shutter becomes dampened to stop loud noises of the mirror movement and the shutter itself. And then you have a self-timer option if you want to take pictures with family and friends. We're now going to look at long exposure noise reduction, and this is a particularly good setting to have turned on. A lot of people don't know what this setting is doing or how it works, and it kicks in automatically as long as you have it turned on. It will kick in automatically when you do a long exposure. What it would do is stop you from getting hot pixels or excessive noise in a long exposure. However, it will double your exposure time. It will take a normal exposure, say I put in a shutter speed of 20 seconds, it would take that 20-second shot, and then it will take another blank frame 20-second shot, and it means that my entire exposure time will be 40 seconds. Another useful setting is the optical VR setting. This allows you to turn off the vibration reduction if you're using a lens that does not have a VR switch. Right at the bottom of this menu you'll see a bank of settings called movie settings, and this is where you can go in and customize how you want your camera to shoot video. First and foremost, you'll see that you've got frame size and frame rate. This is one of the most important settings. This determines the quality of your video by the size of the frame that it records, and it will also determine the frame rate of your video. And this depends if you're recording something that you want to use slow motion for. Generally, my advised setting for this, if you just want to do general home videos, recording, that type of thing, would be 1920 by 1080 at 25p. The 1920 by 1080 giving you full HD video quality. The next setting down from that will say movie quality, and this should just be set to high quality. The only reason you would not want this to be set to high quality is if you were concerned about storage space, and you can set that to normal, but your videos won't look as nice. The microphone setting should be set to auto sensitivity, unless you're in a particularly loud environment or a particularly quiet environment. You can go and input a manual sensitivity into the microphone if you think you needed to. These settings will automatically transfer over to a microphone if you're using an external mic. As long as it's plugged in through the camera, this setting will still be used. The next few settings are pretty straightforward. You have wind noise reduction if you're shooting in a windy location, and then we have manual movie settings, and this is where the camera will allow us to manually control what our shutter speed, aperture and ISO should be whilst recording video. Okay, so we're going to move away from the shooting menu and we're going to move into the custom settings menu. So first of all, we're going to go into autofocus. In here you'll see the first option is A1 AFC priority selection. There's two options in here. You can choose from either focus or release. I would generally have this setting set to release. When I'm shooting in AFC, I want the full control over when the camera is taking the pictures, because generally if I'm using AFC, I'm shooting sports or wildlife, birds in flight, that type of thing, and I want the camera to fire as soon as I push the button. If I have this set to focus, if the camera doesn't quite think that the subject is in focus, it will actually stop me from shooting and it will lock the shutter until it is happy that it has locked 100% focus. Next is number of focusing points, and this should just generally be set to 39. This is not telling you how many points you're using at any one time. What this is telling you is how many points are selectable. 39 points means that when we move our focusing point around in the camera's viewfinder, we have 39 points to choose from. If we set this to 11 points, we would only have 11 points to choose from. Generally this means that our choice of where we want the focusing point to be is then restricted, and we can't be as creative or as accurate in terms of where we want to put our focusing point. Further down from that, you'll see an option that will be called exposure delay mode. This is a particular favourite setting of mine. I use it a lot for landscape photography. What exposure delay mode does is it builds in a delay between the mirror moving and the camera taking an image. This is particularly useful for landscape photography when using a long exposure, because any vibration caused by the mirror movement can cause the image to be soft. The way that it works, if it's turned to on, is you press the shutter button once, the camera will lift the mirror and then build in a 1 second delay. This system is better than using self-timer, for example, whereas a self-timer option will not separate the mirror movement and the shutter movement. In a self-timer, you press the shutter button, nothing happens, it counts down, the mirror comes up and it takes the shot straight away. The next setting we're going to look at is the Assign Function button. You'll need to scroll down a few steps to find it. This is where we can customize the buttons on our cameras. So if there's a particular setting that you use over and over again and you want it to be accessible via a button rather than pressing a menu, you can assign it to a function button. There's a list of options and you can go through these and choose an option that you think you might use. Generally for me, I have ISO assigned to my function button. That means that if I want to choose my ISO quickly, I can press and hold the function button and rotate my rear command dial to change the ISO rather than having to go into the menu every single time. The option below will say Assign AEL/AFL button. Generally, a lot of photographers don't really use this setting for auto exposure lock and auto focus lock anymore. This button is now being used for autofocus, and this is something called back button focus. So to turn back button focus on in your camera, this is where you do that. You choose Assign AEL/AFL button and change that setting to AF on. What this will now do is when you push that button on the back of your camera, it will prompt your camera to focus. The camera will no longer focus from the shutter button. So this can take a while to get used to, but the benefit and the improvement to your photography is worthwhile, especially for wildlife and sport. A nice little setting that not many people know about with this D5600 is that you can assign a touch function. The way that this touch function works is if the camera is to your eye and the flip screen is flipped towards you, so the touch sensitive side is towards you, the right hand side of the screen will remain touch sensitive, and what you can do is use your thumb on the touch screen to change a particular setting. One of my favorites here is focus point selection. By choosing focus point selection and then bringing the camera to my eye, my right thumb can move the focusing point around by rolling around on the touch screen. This is a really useful feature for moving the focus point around really quickly, especially when doing wildlife photography. Next, we're going to go into the setup menu. Really important one at the top of the setup menu, format memory card. So, when it comes to dealing with your memory cards, the best practice would be to go and take your pictures. Once you've taken those pictures, store them on a laptop, a computer, a tablet, that type of thing. But don't delete them on the computer or on the tablet. Put the memory card back into the camera and format that memory card in camera. Never do a format in a computer. By formatting in the camera then can build its own system, build its own folders, put everything where it wants it to be. And this means that you're just much more likely to have a card that's going to last you a longer amount of time. If you start deleting images on the card, you run the risk of having that memory card become corrupt. A great tip here with the D5600 to extend battery life, airplane mode. So not a lot of people know that their camera does have an airplane mode just like their phone does, and what's happening here is because we have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth built into this camera, that Wi-Fi and Bluetooth will remain on until you choose airplane mode. By choosing airplane mode, they become then turned off, and you should see that you get much better battery life because they're not draining your battery in the background. Okay, that brings us to the end of this video. Hope you found some really useful and exciting settings. If you could give this video a like, a thumbs up, and if you want to subscribe to my channel, there's going to be some really exciting stuff coming up. There's going to be more in-depth reviews and product videos on the way. Thank you very much, everyone.